Hi folks, how's everyone doing? So for those that don't know me, I'm Ian. I am an emerging artist, session musician, and music producer here in Vancouver, Canada. And I just thought I'd show you folks around my little bedroom studio. This is where I record my own music, where I track guitar and bass for other people's songs, and even where I mix and master music to a professional standard. And I'm really excited about this video because when I first started recording and mixing, I was going on YouTube trying to figure out what gear I should buy. And yeah, I wasted way too much time researching how much money I should spend on gear, and like I found out that nowadays affordable gear is actually really good, and you can build your dream studio for a price that is not really going to break the bank, is not going to make you go in debt, and you won't have to save up like a whole year for it. So hopefully by the end of this video you should have a better idea of how much money you actually have to spend, what pieces of gear you actually need, and also you should recognize that your gear doesn't matter nearly as much as your skills as a songwriter, an artist, a producer, and a mixing engineer. All the gear that you're gonna see on Sweetwater and on YouTube is only gonna be there to help you out and to make your job a little easier and a little bit more fun, but they're by no means necessary. So come along, let's get you all set up and let's start making some music. So the 5 things you're going to need are a computer, a DAW, an interface, a microphone, and a pair of closed back headphones. And for your microphone, you're going to need a stand, a cable, and a pop filter. Basically what a pop filter does is it blocks plosives, which are very fast bursts of air that come out of your mouth every time that you say a P or a B. If you put your hand in front of your mouth, you're going to see that every time you say a B or a P, it throws a lot of air, and that can distort the sound and ruin your recording. So your computer and your DAW are basically going to be your blank canvas. That's where you're going to record everything, and you're going to be able to edit, and you're going to be able to adjust volumes and use effects and all of that stuff. Up next, you got your audio interface. This basically connects your computer to your guitar or your microphone. If you're just going to use a microphone, you can always buy a USB mic instead that completely bypasses the interface. But most of the really good microphones use XLR connections, which are what these are for. It just gives you a better, cleaner sound. And I know that I don't really have to explain what a microphone is, but just so you know, there are 2 different types of microphones. There are dynamics and condensers. Future in here, I just realized I forgot to mention that there are also ribbon mics, but those are more expensive and they're less useful in home studios. So we'll just worry about dynamic microphones and condenser microphones for now. To generalize the shit out of those 2 categories, let's say that dynamics are less sensitive, but they're a little bit more upfront and they ignore like room reflection and all that. And condensers are very sensitive and very detailed and very beautiful when you record them in a controlled environment. In other words, if you're in a room like this that has a lot of echo, you might benefit from using a dynamic microphone that is going to be less sensitive to it. However, if you're in a slightly more controlled environment like this booth, you might benefit from using a condenser microphone because it's going to be much more sensitive to all the detail and the nuance in someone's performance. If I could choose on a case-by-case basis, I would probably use the condenser microphone whenever I'm singing, and the dynamic microphone whenever I'm screaming or whenever I'm singing with a little bit more aggression, because the condenser microphone is very sensitive and the screaming is just going to be way too much for it, but the dynamic microphone is not as sensitive, so it will keep it a little bit more under control. If you want specific gear recommendations, here's what I use. I love all of this. I have no complaints about any of these pieces of equipment whatsoever. I wasted way too much time researching what computer to get, what interface to get, what microphone to get, and it turns out it doesn't make that big of a difference. Before I get started, I just want to let you know that although this is a budget studio build, it's not the most affordable setup, nor is it the minimum, and also it's not quite a dream setup. It has its limitations, but overall I feel like it's a huge step up from what I started with. If you want to build something similar to what I have here, assuming you have the room, the computer, and the instruments if you need them, Should cost you around 300 bucks American, plus the software if you choose to go with a paid option like I did. If you're on a Mac and you don't want to spend money on software, just go with GarageBand. It's great, it works wonders, and you can do a lot with it. I started out on Pro Tools because of recording school, but then I moved on to Logic, and that's what I have on this computer. Don't go down the rabbit hole of like figuring out which software is the best, because they're all great, and like it really depends on what you're doing and your preferences. If you're doing a lot of recording of live instruments like drums, guitars, and all that stuff, check out these options. Download the trials, try them out before you buy them, because they're all very different. And these are the ones that tend to come up for EDM. Same thing in here, try them out before you buy them. But if you don't have $300 or a computer or a room, just make sure you're subscribed and that you like and share the video, because then I'll show you guys how to make music on your iPhone with GarageBand. It's great, it's very powerful, very impressive, especially considering that most people already have access to it. So stay tuned and stay subscribed. Please check me out on Instagram and also consider booking me as a mixing engineer on Fiverr. I lowered my rates because I'm trying to expand my portfolio, so take advantage of that. And now we've reached the end of my shameless self-plug. Let's go explore this room. First of all, let's talk about the room. This is pretty much an average-sized bedroom, if not slightly bigger. But where this room really shines is with the closet, but we'll come back to that. As you can see, at the front and center of the room, we have the desk. And everything in the studio revolves around it, so I wanted this to be as neat and as organized as possible. As you can see, there aren't many exposed cables, since most of them are located underneath the desk. Over to the right, I have a small dresser with all my cables and headphones. The top drawer being reserved for the most commonly needed ones, and the lower one for those I don't tend to use as much. And moving along to the side of the room, I have all my instruments. Over on the left side of this wall, I have my keyboard, which I use as a MIDI controller, and sometimes I check mixes on it to make sure it's going to hold up in less than ideal scenarios. On the right, I have my guitar and bass, and those tend to get used a lot since most of the work I have now is remote sessions, and bass and guitar are typically what people associate me with. On the very back of the room, I have my bed that actually doubles up as a couch when artists come over. Not now, because of COVID, but otherwise. And finally, to the best part of the room, the closet slash booth slash storage area. This is definitely my favorite part of the room because it allows me to record vocals and acoustic guitar without a lot of echo and without disturbing my neighbors as much. It also gives me the possibility to treat it in the future and have a completely dry sounding environment for perfectly upfront and clear vocals. Additionally, I can use the mattress and some of my couch cushions to have a temporary acoustic treatment set up until I can invest in more pro-level solutions. But if I'm gonna be honest, this room doesn't really have a lot of echo. Like, I'm gonna put a lot of compression on this part just so then you can hear exactly what the room's doing, and it's really not that much. Now let's talk about the gear. For the central hub of the studio, I have a 2018 Mac Mini with an external hard drive for my session files. As for my software, I'm using Logic Pro X with a few external plugins like Archetype Nolly for guitar amps and Wavestune for tuning vocals. For my interface, I'm using the Scarlett 2i2 by Focusrite, and it's a slight step up from the Scarlett Solo. The only difference is that it has two combo inputs instead of one mic and one instrument, which just allows it to be a little bit more versatile. So I can either plug in two instruments or two microphones at the same time. As for my headphones, I'm using the Audio-Technica M50Xs, and although these are a little bit pricey, they're really good, and I got them at a really good discount. So I really recommend them if you have the budget. But you could definitely get away with the M40Xs, and there are some really good offerings by Sennheiser. Just make sure that they're closed back, so then, like, if you're having to do any recording with these, they're not gonna bleed any of the sound out into the real world and into the mics. So yeah, M50Xs are great. As for my instruments, there isn't really anything too fancy going on either. For my keyboard, I'm just using a fairly affordable beginner digital piano, but it's pretty useful because it has a USB port, so I can use it as a MIDI controller or as a pair of speakers. And for my guitar, I have an Epiphone Les Paul, and for my bass, I have the LTD Active bass. I'm not sure what it's called. I think it's like a very crazy product number. They didn't even bother naming it. Both the guitar and the bass are more on the aggressive side, but depending on the amp settings, they can sound very sweet. And for my acoustic guitar, I have this older entry-level Brazilian-made guitar. I don't even know how to describe it very well, if I'm gonna be honest. But I broke it while I was playing it, so yeah, now the action is just way too high. It's not very comfortable, but it actually sounds pretty good. And until I replace it, until I can afford to replace it, I will keep using it. And finally, the mic is the AT2035 by Audio-Technica. This mic sounds very good. It's one of the best in its price range, and it comes with a shock mount, and it has a low cut and a pad. And I use the low cut all the time because it's at 80 hertz, so it's the stuff that you would roll off anyway, so it's pretty useful. We're almost done here, but before you go, I'd just like to tell you about how much I overestimated the amount of money I should spend on a computer and an interface. As you noticed, there are a lot of things that go into building a studio. You have your instruments, your room, your gear, and really those things all play a big role into how good your end product will be. But music production technology has come so far that even affordable computers, interfaces, microphones, and even instruments can be made to a really high standard, to the point where it doesn't matter nearly as much as it used to. Ultimately, it all comes down to your skill as an artist, a performer, and a producer. And next to that is only acoustic treatment. I'm not saying that gear is not important. You have to make sure you're not cheaping out to the point where you buy something that is going to break down in a year or two just after the warranty expires. But as long as you do your research or buy the items I recommended, you should be very well served until you start making enough money from music to justify upgrades, like studio monitors and better mics and interfaces and preamps. That's about it, folks. Let me know what y'all think about this in the comments, and make sure to leave down some tips and suggestions for the people who are just starting out. Thank y'all very much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel for more music-related content. Like and share, you know the drill. Also, if you need a bass player or a guitar player or a mixing engineer, I'll leave my Fiverr and Instagram links in the description. Happy New Year and have a prosperous 2021. I'm like 2 weeks too late, but better late than never. Okay, bye.